For as long as life has existed, the oceans have been home to nightmares, vast, dark, and teeming with predators. On land, things have always seemed a little more manageable, a little safer. But what if, just once, this wasn't true? Imagine a world where stepping onto dry ground was more dangerous than venturing into the depths of the sea. For a brief and extraordinary period in Earth's history, this was reality. Land became a gauntlet of chaos, while the oceans offered refuge. Let's explore this rare and remarkable twist in nature's story. When the waters were humanity's safest bet, around 259 to 252 million years ago, during the late Permian epoch, the Earth was a completely unrecognizable place. Its landmasses were stitched together into a supercontinent called Pangaea, and surrounding it was the colossal Panthalassic Ocean, an enormous body of water that covered nearly 70% of the planet. While the geography was fascinating in its own right, what was happening on the surface of the Earth was a far more chilling tale. The late Permian wasn't just another chapter in Earth's geological history. It was the prelude to the greatest extinction event the planet has ever seen, known as the Permian-Triassic extinction, or the Great Dying. This cataclysm wiped out nearly 90% of marine species and 70% of terrestrial species. The lead up to this extinction was a time of unimaginable suffering, particularly for creatures on land. The land during the late Permian was a death trap. Volcanic activity in what is now Siberia unleashed staggering amounts of carbon dioxide, leading to a runaway greenhouse effect. Temperatures soared, ecosystems collapsed, and the air itself became toxic. Vast swathes of land were rendered uninhabitable due to acid rain, lethal heat waves, and oxygen levels so low they could barely support life. But that wasn't all. The creatures that managed to survive these hellish conditions had to contend with a new wave of predators that seemed almost custom-built to annihilate anything that moved. Enter the Gorgonopsids, Earth's original saber-toothed predators. These terrifying creatures were a far cry from anything you'd want to encounter. Equipped with razor-sharp canines, long, agile limbs, and skulls designed for maximum damage, they ruled the land with ruthless efficiency. Some species, like the fearsome Inostrancevia, grew to over 11 feet long and weighed upwards of 1,000 pounds. To make matters worse, their reign wasn't confined to a single region. They dominated ecosystems across what is now Russia, Africa, and parts of Asia, and they weren't alone. Other predators, including smaller relatives and rival apex predators, thrived in this chaotic environment, turning the land into an ongoing battle royale. For herbivores, survival wasn't just difficult, it was nearly impossible. While the land was embroiled in chaos, the oceans offered a surprising contrast. Sure, they weren't free of danger, no ocean ever is, but compared to the horrors unfolding on land, they were a haven. Why? A combination of factors had left marine ecosystems relatively quiet during this time. The Capetanian mass extinction, which had occurred a few million years earlier, decimated much of the large, predatory marine life. Gone were the terrifying sea scorpions that once ruled the waters and the giant sharks like Helicoprion with their unsettling spiral-toothed jaws. What remained were smaller, less formidable creatures like early sharks and mollusks. Even apex predators in the oceans during this time were modest in size and far less terrifying compared to their prehistoric predecessors or their land-based contemporaries. To add to this, the water buffered against some of the catastrophic effects of the climate changes that were devastating life on land. Temperature shifts were less extreme in the oceans, and the acid rain that poisoned terrestrial ecosystems didn't have the same immediate, widespread impact underwater. This is why, for the first and only time in history, your odds of survival were better if you stayed in the ocean. While the oceans offered a relatively peaceful retreat, The land during this time was nothing short of a nightmare. The reign of the Gorgonopsids was only part of the story. The landscape itself seemed designed to test survival to its absolute limits. Earth was in the throes of one of its harshest climates, with wild temperature swings, relentless volcanic activity, and a lack of stabilizing ecosystems that we take for granted today. Vegetation, though present, was sparse and low-lying, offering little in terms of cover or sustenance. The dominant flora, Glossopteris, was primarily clustered near waterways, forcing herbivores to venture into the crosshairs of the predators that lurked nearby. This scarcity of resources created an ecosystem where every living creature was either hunting or being hunted, with no middle ground. And then there was the issue of the sky. The atmosphere during the late Permian was thick with ash and greenhouse gases, the remnants of catastrophic volcanic eruptions. These eruptions, particularly those linked to the Siberian traps, released massive amounts of carbon dioxide and sulfur dioxide, causing acid rain and a destabilized climate. For terrestrial life, even the air itself was an enemy. Yet, somehow, life persisted, if only barely. Amidst this chaos, some creatures managed to eke out a living. The herbivorous Dicynodonts were among them. Resembling a bizarre mix of a turtle and a pig, these creatures had beak-like mouths and tusks, which they used to strip bark and foliage from the sparse vegetation. They were tough, resilient, and built to endure harsh conditions, but they were far from invincible. Predators like Gorgonopsids found them easy prey, and their slow, plodding movements made escape nearly impossible. Yet, despite the odds, Dicynodonts managed to survive, becoming one of the few groups that would live to see the dawn of the Triassic period. Another curious survivor of the late Permian chaos was the Therocephalian. These small, mammal-like reptiles were agile and resourceful, often scavenging for food rather than hunting it outright. Their ability to adapt to changing conditions gave them a slight edge, but they too lived under the constant shadow of extinction. At this point, you might be wondering, why was life in the water so much less terrifying than on land? The answer lies in the ripple effects of extinction events. The Capetanian extinction had devastated marine ecosystems, wiping out many apex predators and larger species. This left the oceans relatively calm, with smaller, less aggressive creatures dominating the waters. Additionally, the vastness of the Panthalassic Ocean offered a level of protection that land simply couldn't match. While land dwellers were packed into tight ecosystems with limited resources, marine life had the luxury of space. A shark or ammonite could avoid competition and predators simply by moving to a less crowded part of the ocean. Moreover, the cooling effects of ocean currents acted as a natural buffer against the volcanic-induced climate chaos that plagued the land. While the atmosphere above was a noxious mix of gases, the waters below remained relatively stable, providing a refuge for those who could call it home. However, this period of relative peace for marine life was short-lived. The end Permian extinction, also known as the Great Dying, was just around the corner. This cataclysmic event would obliterate more than 90% of marine species and 70% of terrestrial species, marking the single most devastating extinction in Earth's history. The Great Dying was triggered by the same volcanic eruptions that had been quietly wreaking havoc on land. As the Siberian traps continued to pour lava and gases into the atmosphere, the oceans began to feel the effects. Carbon dioxide levels spiked, leading to ocean acidification. Oxygen levels plummeted, creating vast dead zones where almost no life could survive. Marine ecosystems collapsed as food chains broke down, and the oceans that had once been a sanctuary turned into a suffocating death trap. The period when water was safer than land stands out as one of nature's rare paradoxes. It was a time when evolutionary pressures pushed life to its limits, reshaping ecosystems in ways that still influence the natural world today. Though fleeting, this chapter in Earth's history offers a glimpse into the incredible resilience of life, even in the face of unimaginable adversity. For humanity, it's a humbling reminder of how fragile and how interconnected our ecosystems truly are. Whether in the ocean's depths or on dry land, survival has always been a matter of adaptation, persistence, and a little bit of luck.